In traditional fighting games, there exists a term called an option select that most players are familiar with. Option selecting refers to performing a series of inputs in order to account for as many scenarios as possible. To gain a firm understanding of what option selects are, let's watch a clip that shows us how they can be utilized in Street Fighter IV.
An option select is a joystick or button input which functions as multiple possible actions simultaneously, letting the game engine decide the best counter to a situation. Specific instances allow only certain moves to come out, so you can worry less about your opponent's options and focus instead more on your own offense. Option selects are all possible due to move priority, and the crouch tech is the prime example. If you crouch while performing a throw, a crouching short will come out, indicating the dominant option. However, there are subordinate options depending on what your opponent does. If they mess up a block string, you'll interrupt them with a crouching short. If they do a successful block string, you will continue blocking, and if they go in for a tick throw, you'll tech it. A good option select can cover multiple bases. This one has an interrupt, a continue blocking, and a throw tech.
As you can see, the option select described in the video allows Ryu to defend himself from 3 different outcomes. Traditional fighting games are riddled with these types of option selects, and finding the best ones has been normalized for decades. Within the Melee community, option selects have been discussed here and there, but as a whole, the community hasn't recognized how prominent they truly are within this game. To give you an idea, I'll provide a very basic example. In the Fox vs. Marth matchup, there is a constant debate regarding whether Fox should back air or up air Marth after upthrowing him at low percent. The mindset many Fox players abide by in this situation is that they can opt to take the safe back air, but the reward for doing so isn't too spectacular. This makes it tempting to go for an up air in the hopes that the Marth player will be caught off guard and fail to smash DI. Up air gives Fox the chance of a lengthier punish, however, it also runs the risk of disaster if Marth SDIs the first hit. The flaw in the mindset I just described is thinking that the Marth player can be caught off guard. This is because Marth can option select a smash DI input regardless of whether Fox goes for an up air or not. Even if Fox goes for a back air, Marth should always time an SDI input for when the first hit of up air would have hit him just in case Fox chooses that option, as there's little to no downside in doing so. If you're up against a Marth player who knows this, then there's a true element of luck when it comes to landing both hits of Fox's up air. Marth's ability to option select SDI in this situation causes the metagame to evolve in an interesting way. At higher levels of play, you may see Fox upthrow back air Marth. Then Marth will SDI the back air horizontally. This interaction carries a ton of hidden meaning, as both players had complex reasoning for their choices. What happened here is the Fox player decided that they respected the Marth player enough to forego using up air, as that might lead to Marth turning the entire situation on Fox. On Marth's end, the SDI input wasn't even intended for the back air, but rather to relegate Fox to back air rather than up air, if that makes sense. By showing Fox that an SDI will be option selected every single time, the Marth player was able to make Fox settle for a lesser punish, and so they can be satisfied with how they played the situation. This is what I call the hidden game of defense, and as you might have guessed, Melee is riddled with these types of interactions. There's a term in poker that justifies Marth's decision-making process in this situation. Poker is a game filled with incomplete information, and so you have to base your decisions on the odds. This is why the term expected value is very common within the poker world. Expected value, or EV for short, can be thought of as assigning a value and a probability to every possible outcome, and making a calculated decision from there. Marth's decision to option select an SDI input represented good EV, because it took away Fox's desire to up air at no expense. Marth was well aware that this SDI wouldn't do anything of value if Fox back aired, and that even if Fox up aired, the SDI still wasn't guaranteed to succeed. But the possibility of Fox going for an up air and failing because of this SDI was enough to make Fox change his game plan, which is why the option select was worth it. The takeaway here is that the outcome is far less important than the game plan that precedes it, meaning the punishment that Marth was eventually met with is far less important than the game plan Marth devised back when Fox grabbed him in the first place. In this video, I'll be teaching you how to make similarly good decisions from the defender's perspective so that you can hang on to your stocks for longer and clutch out more wins. If you're a fan of this kind of Melee content, please don't forget to subscribe. To start things off, we'll need to go over the advanced defensive mechanics that we have to work with. I highly recommend watching some of my previous videos to gain more detailed explanations on each of these, and so I've linked the corresponding ones in this video's description. However, I'll also be providing brief explanations for each of them that'll probably suffice. The first three mechanics you'll need to be familiar with are Trajectory DI, Smash DI, and Automatic Smash DI. For clarification, Trajectory DI is the form of DI that people often just call DI. In order, these mechanics allow you to modify the trajectory of an attack by up to 18 degrees by pointing the analog stick perpendicularly, shift as many as 6 units in-game by jamming the analog stick in a direction during hit lag, and shift as many as 3 units in-game by holding the analog stick or C-stick on the last frame of hit lag. The next mechanic to know about is floor hugging, which is the term I use to describe the act of using ASDI down to hug the floor after hit lag. If your character doesn't tumble, then floor hugging allows them to incur only 4 frames of landing lag prior to becoming actionable. Floor hugging is arguably the most powerful defensive mechanic in the game, as it allows your character to incur a very low amount of lag after being attacked. This often lets you soak a hit, then counterattack afterward. The next mechanic to know about is a TDI floor hug, which is an alternative form of floor hugging that allows you to floor hug until higher percents. A TDI floor hug achieves this by modifying the attack's trajectory such that its vertical knockback is reduced, which prolongs your ability to floor hug with ASDI down. This requires the simultaneous use of the analog stick for TDI and the C-stick for ASDI. To give you an idea of the improved floor hugging power that TDI floor hugs offer, consider the fact that Falcon can only floor hug Fox's Nair through 116%, but he can TDI floor hug it through 205%. Next, we'll need to be familiar with all the outcomes that can occur after a floor hug. While the most favorable outcome is for the defender to incur 4 frames of landing lag, this isn't always possible. To be exact, incurring 4 frames of landing lag won't be possible when the opponent's attack would deal enough knockback to cause tumble. Once the defender tumbles, there are 3 possible outcomes upon floor hugging. The first is raw knockdown, which lasts 26 frames. The second is a tech in place, which also lasts 26 frames but allows the defender to act immediately afterward. And the third is a tech roll, which lasts 40 frames. Tech rolls last longer than techs in place, which can be disadvantageous. However, tech rolls come with the benefit of yet another defensive mechanic, which is rooting your character. Rooting your character or giving your character a root refers to entering an animation that explicitly prevents your character from leaving the stage or platform that they're on. To be clear, plenty of animations achieve this effect, and tech roll is one of them. Similarly, grounded animations such as tilt and smash attacks root your character as well. This is why Luigi is able to halt his wave dash at the ledge by performing a down smash, whereas he would fall off otherwise. So what is the practical purpose of rooting your character with a tech roll? The practical purpose is to stall your character at the end of the stage so that their horizontal knockback can deplete. To show you what I mean by this, let's take a look at a situation in which Fox takes a forward smash from Puff and incurs a massive amount of horizontal knockback. In order to survive this forward smash, Fox must TDI floor hug, then tech roll in order to root himself. But now, Fox still has a massive amount of knockback even after the tech roll. If Fox lets go of his controller, then he will still fly off stage. However, what Fox can do instead is perform a spot dodge with the analog stick in order to keep himself rooted. This allows Fox to deplete most of his remaining knockback. In case you're curious, analog stick spot dodges are the best means of rooting in the game because they can be buffered up to 3 frames early, which means they offer a 4-frame window. Other means of rooting only offer a 1-frame window. Tech rolling, then rooting your character with spot dodges is an excellent strategy, but it isn't always the best choice. Sometimes you'll be in a position where it is better to counterattack your opponent directly after a TDI floor hug. In this situation, you may want to consider a different option called a slide-off. A slide-off is performed by TDI floor hugging without teching. Since knockdown doesn't root your character, this lets you incur as little as 1 frame of knockdown followed by 1 frame of fall. Then, because knockdown happens to cancel your character's hit stun, slide-offs make it possible to act after as little as 2 frames of downtime. While slide-offs don't require a tech input, ASDI down techs and tech rolls both do. When it comes to these techniques, it's important to know the rules that surround teching, as they're more complicated than you might think. First, a digital L or R button input will give your character a tech window for the next 20 frames. Then you'll be unable to tech for the 20 frames afterward. You also have to make sure to never spam another tech input during any of these 40 frames, or else your existing tech window will be cancelled and the 40-frame timer will reset. Finally, there's a mechanic called analog L cancelling that I recently introduced in my last video. Analog L cancelling refers to an L cancel that is performed with analog L, analog R, or Z. This is the best way to L cancel in the game because unlike digital L cancels, analog L cancels don't conflict with teching. The conflict I'm talking about comes up during the hit lag frames of your aerial attack. Hit lag frames are the freeze frames that occur when your attack connects on an opponent, and inputting an L cancel during these frames is perfectly fine. However, inputting a tech during them is not. In this scenario, for example, Fox hits another Fox with a shuffled Nair, and he inputs a digital L cancel during hit lag. Believe it or not, Fox has now made it impossible for himself to tech the ASDI down shine that he will be met with. This is because during hit lag, there is a rule that states that L-cancel and tech inputs will be spammed on every frame after they are input. Meaning, if you L-cancel or tech on the first frame of a hit lag window, then you'll actually be L-canceling or teching on every frame of that hit lag window. Since L-cancels don't contain a lockout, this is fine as far as they're concerned, but since techs do contain a lockout, this will always cause your tech to fail. Analog L-cancels are important for us to acknowledge because they allow us to work around the rules of hit lag that I just described. By analog L-canceling his Nair, Fox is able to option select a tech input after hit lag resolves and receive a much better outcome. As you can see, analog L-cancels go hand in hand with the defensive mechanics we'll be focusing on. Their purpose is to ensure that your aerial attack's landing lag is an option selectable state for teching, whereas digital L-cancels take this option away from you. The next step to mastering defensive option selects is being familiar with the term I just introduced, option selectable states. An option selectable state refers to a game state that allows you to option select TDI, SDI, ASDI, and/or tech inputs without consequences. For example, in the Fox vs. Marth scenario from earlier, Marth was able to option select SDI during his hit stun frames because there was no downside to jamming the analog stick in this situation. These are the types of option selectable states that we'll be looking for. Ultimately, all of the defensive mechanics in Melee stem from three actuators: the analog stick, the C-stick, and digital L and R. What we need to be able to do is sneak these defensive inputs in whenever we can, but the problem is that this isn't always possible. This is because the analog stick, the C-stick, and the L and R buttons all correspond with other actions that we need to avoid. From the wait state, for example, none of the defensive mechanics can be option selected. If you try to SDI to the side from wait, you'll dash. If you try to SDI down with the C-stick, you'll down smash. And if you try to tech, you'll shield. So while you do get the defensive input you intended for in all of these scenarios, the fact that they come packaged with other actions defeats the purpose. Luckily, there are several states that let us input defensive mechanics for free. I'll start by listing a couple of them. The first option selectable state is the landing lag of an aerial attack. This game state has no restrictions on analog stick or C-stick inputs, and it has no restrictions on teching either so long as you performed an analog L-cancel. Something else to keep in mind is that even if you land without performing an aerial attack, you'll still have 4 frames of landing lag. These frames of landing lag work just as well. Next, you should be on the lookout for grounded attack animations. For example, once Fox enters his up smash animation, he's free to input any defensive option he pleases. Grab animations work too. Another set of states to look out for are knockdown and get up states. These provide you with plenty of frames that don't contain any restrictions. Most ledge get up options fall under this category too. As you can see, the states that I've listed so far are all unrestricted. Something else that I've theorized is that roll, spot dodge, and ledge getup roll can all be added to the unrestricted list as well, so long as you perform them with analog L or R. Just like analog L cancels, there's nothing stating that these actions have to be performed with digital L or R. I find this especially useful for rolls and spot dodges, as you can initiate them with an analog L or R input, then option select a tech later to protect their vulnerable frames. The other unrestricted state to know about is hit stun. In the very first scenario I showed you in this video, Fox gave Marth a hit stun window to work with, which Marth then took advantage of by option selecting SDI. Hit stun is one of the best windows for option selects because it removes the ability to control your character, which lets you attempt DI and tech inputs at no expense. I'll also group being grabbed by your opponent into this category since it's similar. Unlike these last few states, the next few that I'll be showing you contain some restrictions. This means that they can be used to option select some but not all of the defensive mechanics. In order, they are air dodge landing lag, dash and run, and shield. Air dodge landing lag lasts 10 frames, which makes it a good spot for option selecting DI inputs. However, it's less good than the other forms of landing lag because it has to be preceded by a tech input. Since you have to press digital L or R in order to air dodge, your tech has to take place very early on, which isn't always what you'd want. Next up are dash and run. These are good spots for sneaking in ASDI down with the C-stick. In fact, one of the earliest theories Melee players had about ASDI down was that it might be best to point the C-stick down the entire time they are dashing or running. I found that this theory is true for the most part, but there are a few things to be wary of. For one, you can't use the analog stick for TDI or SDI as well as you'd like to in this situation because you need it in order to actually dash and run. Furthermore, you can't input a tech from these states because you'll shield. And finally, if you happen to try to shield while the C-stick is pointed down, then you'll unintentionally perform a spot dodge. As you can see, the dash and run state is quite flawed, but it's still good for ASDIing down with the C-stick. Speaking of unintentional spot dodges, the shield state is worth going over as well. From this position, you can't use the C-stick at all, or else you'll perform an out-of-shield option. But what you can still do is tilt the shield down with the analog stick in order to option select ASDI down. This is the only way to ASDI down while remaining in shield. As I said earlier, the 3 states that I just showed you are flawed, but they're all still very important. While they don't let you tap into the full arsenal of defensive tech, it's still good to make the most of them. Now, let's go over 2 last option selectable states, being airborne and being in an aerial attack animation. Being airborne is very different from being grounded because analog stick directional inputs aren't nearly as committal. For example, you can always SDI to the side when you're airborne, and at worst you'll drift slightly in that direction. Similarly, you can input up or down freely if your ability to double jump or fast fall has already been shut off. As for being in an aerial attack animation, this follows the same rules, except it lets you ASDI freely with the C-stick and input text as well. Now that we know about the option selectable states, let's go over how this information can be applied. Just like with the Fox vs. Marth scenario we originally went over, the goal in each of these scenarios is to negate or lessen certain options that the opponent might choose through the use of option selects. Even if the opponent doesn't end up choosing these options, we can still take solace in the fact that our decisions had good expected value. In the first scenario, we'll be playing Falco against Peach on FD. Peach has a deadly chain grab on this stage which she can finish with a forward throw. Forward throw poses a big threat to Falco because of the fact that it isn't reactable, but there's a way for Falco to negate this option if he's willing to put in some extra effort. What Falco can do here is option select survival DI for forward throw every single time Peach grabs him, and then adjust his DI for up throw whenever he reacts to her picking that option. This might seem extensive, but it's the best thing in the game that Falco can do, as it takes away the possibility that he ever DIs a forward throw poorly. Once the Peach player realizes that Falco knows to do this, they'll have to settle for finishers such as dash attack that may give Falco a better chance to survive. In the next scenario, we'll be playing Captain Falcon against Fox. Both players are in a last stock situation, but unfortunately Falcon's at 200%. Falcon needs to land a grab here, but all it takes is a single nair for Fox to close out the game, which makes the situation incredibly skewed. From Falcon's perspective, you might think that going for a grab is a huge risk, but if he knows what to do, then this isn't the case. What Falcon needs to do here is option select a TDI floor hug the moment he goes for a JC grab. Now, even if the JC grab attempt backfires, Falcon can tech roll across the entire stage and root himself at the ledge. From there, Falcon should do some analog stick spot dodges in order to root himself for even longer and deteriorate the rest of his knockback. Believe it or not, if Fox recognizes that Falcon is picking this option, then it may very well be better for Fox to drill Falcon rather than nair. Finally, let's take a look at Fox being tech chased by Sheik. There's a really good option select for Fox to consider here. Whenever Fox enters the 26 frame knockdown animation, he can hold ASDI up and spam SDI up inputs to de-incentivize Sheik from going for a jab reset. If Fox gets lucky and aligns one of his SDI inputs with when he gets jabbed, then this will help him break free. Once Sheik realizes that Fox is picking this option, she may give up on jab resetting him entirely and settle for regrabbing his wake up instead, but this increases the risk that Sheik drops the tech chase. In each of these scenarios, the defender recognized that they were in an option selectable situation. From there, they chose the appropriate defensive option in order to make their opponent settle for a less good punish. I call this the hidden game of defense because as the level of play increases, the attacker eventually realizes that conventional punishes often don't work against competent opponents, and that it may even be best to give up on them entirely. All of this stems from defensive inputs that happen in secrecy but have a very visible impact on the match. The key takeaway from this video is that it's less about the outcome and more about the game plan that got you there. By coming up with better game plans, you can make your opponent settle for weaker ones.